Welcome to this course, Social Work with Victims of Abuse. I'm really proud of you and glad that you signed up. This is our little pilot study with my colleagues here, Steven Spielberg and Carlene, who's going to help me as the semester goes along. I've taught this course, I think, 20 or 23 times in various versions, 12-week versions, 1-week versions, in Whitehorse, Quesnel, different geographical locations. I've taught it with small groups of as few as I think 7 and as many as 47. Mm-hmm. So this is a brand new version, but I have some things to bring to the table that I hope will be useful. This is our first video, and we're hopeful that it's going to be technically intense and awesome. I'm going to just do some quick little show and tell kind of things. So, this is a mixed version between an intensive 1-week course, this particular version, and the 12-week version. I'm trying to stretch it a little bit so you have time to read. What I'm going to do right now is do a little show and tell of these books. And I'm going to explain to you why I chose these books. Those of you who know me, Carlene knows me, she's been in my home. You can bear witness that I have about 10,000 books and more, and counting. Maybe 10,001, a new one arrived today in the mailbox. So I didn't choose these books. I never choose the books casually. I've chosen each of these from among perhaps hundreds that I could have chosen. I chose them for a variety of reasons. This one right here, Healing Wounded Hearts from Farage and Gravelin. I've chosen this because she writes in here her own experience, her own story as an Indigenous woman, as a Two-Spirited woman, as a social justice activist, and to my knowledge, one of the very, very few women in Canada who has a PhD in social work, but also is an art therapist, a trained art therapist from the Vancouver Art Therapy Institute, the same place that I also graduated from, so I've got a little bit of shine and pride about that. She writes here in a way that some people will find disturbing or awkward or uncomfortable, in that it is first person. Also, that she messes with the Queen's English. She uses capital letters where maybe there shouldn't be, according to the Queen's English or according to APA style. Those kind of, she breaks all the rules. Mm-hmm. I wished you to have that experience of reading something that feels awkward, a little bit alien, a little bit uncomfortable. That is a good way to begin when we think about social work with victims of abuse. The Queen imposed her English, her language, on Indigenous peoples all over the world. Language is a very powerful resource for liberation, but also for oppression. Mm-hmm. Our work as social workers or helpers or counselors, language is what we're using. It's one of our, let's say 80% of the process or product is language. Mm-hmm. So I wish you to get a little bit messed up, a little bit unruffled, and to reflect on how do we use our words. And also, of course, these are the words and the story of an Indigenous woman who has experienced abuse. Mm-hmm. Right now, right here in Canada, as I do this video with you and teach this course, we have had this last weekend, the last 6 days, all over Canada and the world, protests and rallies about oppression of people of color. So they've been sparked, of course, because of 4 white cops who murdered a black man in full public view, and at first weren't being reprimanded. If it wouldn't have been videoed, they may have gotten away with it. We know that Indigenous women here in Canada, Indigenous people all over the Western world, have experienced abuse in all kinds of ways from all kinds of people. Priests, teachers, doctors, cops, their neighbors, their spouses. So this is a really good book. It's affordable. I believe it's a quick read once you accept the fact that she's breaking rules of APA and the proper Queen's language. Once you accept that and get with that flow, you'll learn a lot from this course and from this book. We've started here we'll go more depthfully into that. Healing Wounded Hearts from Dr. Jean Gravelin. The next book we have on our list is Feminist Counseling. So this is a Canadian one. It is a collection of different activists and scholars talking about women on the margins, families, the good mother, men in violence, confronting feminist dilemma of women who abuse. Again, this is a kind of thing that we're a little bit awkward talking about sometimes. There are women who sexually abuse. There are women who neglect their kids, who abuse their kids. There are women, like my own mother. I was sexually abused by my father through my whole childhood, and I believe my mother knew. But she was frightened to deal with it because of her own abuse. And many of us have had experiences like that, where either our families, a sister, a mother, a cousin, a grandmother abused us directly, or looked the other way, or in an institution. Sometimes a woman is sexually harassed or sexually abused, and other women look the other way. So we'll look on a lot of levels of abuse and all different kinds of abuse, and this book gives you different little snippets or chunks, not only of how to recognize the abuse, understand the abuse, but how to respond to the abuse. And this is Canadian. So, one of the next books I have here is Creative Recovery. This is a little bit, I wanted to have something about art therapy. I'm, as I said earlier, an art therapist myself. Creativity has always been part of my process. I didn't always know what to call it. The feminist movement, different protest rallies, women's circles, women's weekends, retreats, have used creativity in all kinds of ways, but we didn't necessarily call it art therapy. Similar to Indigenous people, with Jean Gravelin talking here, that creativity for healing is a natural, organic thing, whether it's journaling or art or drawing or painting or beadwork or quilting or even cooking, gardening, foraging. There's different ways that people use creativity without it being labeled art therapy. But this book from Eric Meisel, he is very, very famous. I think he's published about 20 books now on creativity. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist, psychology. He also encourages us to use creative writing and journaling, and that's one of the things I'll talk a lot about during this semester and do some examples of. This book is very, I think, yummy because it's got tiny little chunks of thought, theory, and then application and practical integration. The personal is political, the private is public, the public is private. These things in a structural social work world are all interlinked. Right? So we're saying about Black Lives Matter, Indigenous Lives Matter. The story we heard of the man who was killed by the cops, that's obviously an instance of abuse.
Yep.
Right? We also need to reflect on his perhaps spouse, his kids, his cousin. Today we saw his brother on the news, his parents. So when we think of social work with victims of abuse, we often think of one perpetrator, one victim. But it's actually spirals that go out and out and out, and it's also multi-generational. So we'll talk about that. And this book helps you to kind of process some of your own thoughts and feelings and some of the ways that you've been abused. We've all been abused in some way. We've all experienced microaggressions, whether that's in regards to issues like homophobia, poverty, even rural isolation is a type of abuse. If you live somewhere in an isolated community and the 3 levels of government don't care about you and don't respond to you, that's a type of abandonment and abuse from the municipal, provincial, federal government. Right? We see right now in the States, some of the governors are calling for the federal, the equivalent of our federal government, to Trump to speak up and step up and offer some support and soothing and healing and clarity. It's not happening. So when one level of government abandons us, it's a type of abuse. When something could have been done differently, and it isn't done differently, and it's consciously not done differently, it's a type of neglect and abandonment. Right? So that's part of there. Now this one is Canadian Tire. This is all the aisles at Canadian. Carlene and I love Canadian Tire and Home Depot. We love them. Yeah. Best thing. So these are 45 techniques every counselor should know. So these techniques aren't necessarily specifically and exclusively to work with social work with victims of abuse. But
communicate with people.
Yeah, they all work. They all sooner or later in your career with a particular client or situation are relevant and useful. And it's kind of like aisle 1 at Canadian Tire might have everything for painting. Aisle 2 has everything for electronics. Aisle 3 for plumbing. Aisle 5 for gardening.
Yeah.
I say you need to know which aisle you got to go to, and you need to know if it's a plumbing problem, I want to be using plumbing stuff.
And of my plumbing stuff, what is the most beneficial for this project?
For this moment, exactly. For this moment, this thing, exactly. So these are the 4 books, and my belief is you should be able to get most of them even secondhand, and I believe that altogether it should come to a little less than $200, which is fair enough for a 4th year course. Well, I try.
Like one bio textbook.
Right, I try. What can I do? So one other little thing I wanted to say to you in this first little video of, what are we doing here? Social work with victims of abuse. There's our 4 books. I wanted to talk a little bit about art therapy. Some people get all scared and nervous. Oh no, she's going to make me do famous paintings and paint a tree that looks exactly like a tree. No, I would never do that to people. And art therapy has a core belief that we always set people up to succeed. So you only ask people to do things that you know that they can technically do really quickly, or in a way that is satisfying, a way that will make them feel competent and not gawky or yucky.
Or judged in any way.
Or judged in excellent, right. So this right here, this is one little example of a core idea with all victims of abuse, whether we're talking about abuse of children, abuse of teens, abuse of adults or the elderly, whether we're talking about sexual abuse, homophobia, racist abuse, economic abuse. Abuse all the ways around involves shame. It sets people up to feel somehow less than, or it's their fault, or embarrassed to talk about what happened to them. Shame is an aspect of all social work with all victims of abuse. It's somewhere in the story. So this, to me, as someone who was sexually abused through my whole childhood, this represents shame. And you might be able to see, I hope so, I put a little doll on here, and I've put this over her face. She didn't really see or understand at the time precisely what was happening, and she feels all kind of tied up and clumped up with the ick of shame. Now this right here is some little rodent that I found at Value Village. You'll hear me mention Value Village many times. I get no kickbacks. And Dollar Store, I get no kickbacks, I get no bonus, nothing, no coupons, but it's a useful place. This is some kind of a rat doll, and shame can feel like a rat, something creepy. If some people associate rats, no judgment on rats. They're just doing the rat thing, right? But humans have imposed the idea that rats can be icky or scary.
They carried plague at one point.
They're
dirty.
Plague. Yeah, but not all do. Let's not besmirch all rats.
Carried,
that's right.
It's a past tense. We just haven't got there yet.
Yeah. So here is shame. Shame can be like this, that it kind of comes at you, and it can be behind you, and even when you think, okay, it's gone now, I'm healed, it's behind me. Something that can happen that can kind of put it back into your moment or your day-to-day. And a very common example is women will tell me all the time, this happens to me. I'm size, let's say 3X. I go to the mall. I'm going to the mall. I'm kind of happy. I'm going to the mall. I'm going to have French fry. And I'm in there a little bit, and then I start to feel ugly. I start to feel frumpy. I start to feel bad about myself. And then I consciously have to realize, oh, look at all the mannequins here. They're all size 0 or size 1. They're all the bodies of a 12-year-old girl with Barbie boobies or something. And they're all a certain look of sexually available, wanted, and all this stuff. And then I feel like, oh, I'm old and fat and not wanted in this world. I don't fit subconsciously. So shame is like that it can kind of, you're having your happy day, doing your thing, and it can come at you sideways out of nowhere, right? This is often those of you, and I'm sure some of you have worked with people who have drug or alcohol issues. They may be on a recovery path, they're headed in a good way, and something happens and they relapse. It can be that someone shamed them. Something came up that reminded them and made them feel really grungy and ugly, and then they had a drink, right? And then they slid back. So this is the kind of art I might invite you to do. I might invite you to experiment with. It's never a question of the beautiful end product. It's the process of making it. As I made this and other art pieces I might show you along the way, the process of making this, of putting the goopy glue and the different kinds of rope and putting it there and thinking about it and experimenting with the textures here, that helped me to make sense of something that was diffuse and foggy inside me, and it was very satisfying. So when I say art therapy, that's the kind of thing that, oh, look, Carly's got something here. You want to say a few words about what this means to you?
I feel like you're probably the best intern for that one, because I don't think I can top that story.
This is from a group for women that I facilitated, and a woman had experienced some harassment, abuse, bad feelings at work, and she decided to make this, and it says, my little box of shit. My little box of shit. And she glued this little monster creepy thing on top, and it's all kind of yucky, goopy, and inside we actually have shit, right? And so there's a whole bunch of stuff you can play with, get your shit together, put that shit behind you. That person's full of shit. We actually have a workshop we've got all planned to someday do with social service providers about shit happens. Shit. So this is a good example. Thank you for bringing that, Carlene. Is that my little box of shit? You can see this didn't require a master's degree in fine art. The resources are always set up. All the little letters and this creepy doll here and this shit and so on.
Yeah.
Our task as art therapists, facilitators, is to put out everything a person might need, and we assist them in the moment.
And then you make it into something beautiful.
Right. It's potent. Right. So beautiful in that it's potent, that it expresses something. Not necessarily beautiful as in it'll win an art show. Right. So
beautiful as in there was thought into it.
Right. Yeah. It matches. It matches that thing inside that another person can feel. We all look at this and think, my little box of shit. We've all had shit at work somewhere. And if you have a job in an agency where you've never had that, you tell me about that agency, because I want to go work there. Stuff's like a good place. I need that. I need to know about that. So that's my little intro of why I chose these books, how we're going to proceed with each other, what art therapy means, just a little taste of it, and a little bit about what do all victims of all social work with victims of abuse moments or stories or applications of theory and insight, what do they all have in common? There are many things in common. We'll talk about patterns, but shame is one of the lead ones. How do we help people recover from shame, talk about shame, and how do we help them identify solidarities and communions of, oh, that person who may have been beaten up because he's gay, and me, sexually abused by my parents, and that woman over there who's been treated badly at work. We all have something in common. Abuse often tries to isolate us and make us feel individual. It was our own fault. A common one with sexual abuse or rape is, Oh, well, she brought it on herself because she wore a red dress. No, no. We're going to go beyond the 1001 Big Lies about what causes these things to happen. And thank you for signing up for the course. I hope we have some really memorable learnings together. Thank you, Carlene.
Thank you, Sai.